I, 29 male, was dating my girlfriend, 25 female, at the time of my uncle's passing. He was like a father figure to me, so this loss hit me hard. I didn't have my father growing up, but his brother stepped in to be the example that I needed. When he died, I was stuck with this terrible feeling like he didn't get to teach me everything I needed to know. I felt lost. It was hard for me to function, and I knew I wasn't there for my girlfriend like I normally was. We used to go out often and make each other laugh, but neither of those things were happening. She wasn't afraid to share her disappointment in my behavior. She said I wasn't amounting to the man she needed to have by her side. Because of this, she suggested we take a break until I was over it. This was the last thing I wanted, and don't think I didn't realize how heartless my girlfriend was being. It was red flag central over here. But at this point, I had very little mental capacity to handle any deep, honest conversations. I could hardly formulate thoughts, but I knew I wanted her to be there for me. I wanted her to sleep over and take care of me until I saw hope in the future, but she didn't volunteer. She did the opposite by leaving me. I guess a part of me was too embarrassed to ask her to stay or show any sign of weakness, so I let her go. After my uncle's funeral, she asked if I was better yet. I told her no, and started to see how selfish and inconsiderate this girl was. A few weeks later, I hadn't heard much from her, but I assumed she was still my girlfriend. I wanted to ask her out on a date, but I was still really sad, and I knew she'd be able to sense it on me. Out of the blue, my friend from high school called me up. It had been years since I heard from her personally, but we were friends online. She got to the point right away and told me she just saw my girlfriend at a club with another guy. She named him, and I knew who he was. My girlfriend and he were very close in high school, but stopped talking after we got together. Now I was being told that my girlfriend was going around telling her friends that she and AP were best friends again. I called her and asked if she was seeing another guy. She admitted she was hanging out with AP, but it wasn't like they were seeing each other. She said he was there for her while I needed space. I told her I didn't need space. I needed her to come stay with me for a while because I was lonely and needed support. She hesitated and awkwardly said she would be home soon, but she needed some time to gather her stuff together. 2 days later, I was still waiting and she ghosted me. My high school friend called again and said she heard through the grapevine that my girlfriend spent the night at AP's house, where she went down on him after he did the same to her. Before I could even process this terrible news or decide what to do, my girlfriend walked through the front door with her stuff, acting like everything was normal and it was good to be home. I freaked out on her. I called her a bunch of names and said she was crazy for thinking she could play me like a fiddle, like I wouldn't find out what a waste of time she was. She cried and said what they did didn't mean anything. She just needed that relief and love from someone. I said I did too, but it wouldn't be from her ever again. I said I hated her for betraying me when I needed her most. She left dramatically, defending herself by saying she couldn't have known I was going to become so pathetic when my uncle died. Then she told me to grow up as she drove away. I really hated her by this point. She said and did things she'd never be able to take back. She goes a hopping 2 months before calling me, hyperventilating and crying, trying to make me feel pity and concern for her. I asked her why she was calling me, so she calmed down a little and said she just walked in on AP cheating on her with one of her friends. She bawled her eyes out as she told me I was right all along, that she should have been there for me when my uncle passed. She said she couldn't have possibly understood what I was going through because until now, she never experienced heartbreak. I said I was glad she got to experience heartbreak and asked her not to call me again. She yelled as I hung up and blocked her number. I've been doing great on my own since she called me. I had a rebound reunion with my old friend from high school and worked overtime for weeks to buy myself a dog. Thanks to this unpleasant experience, I know that I need a spouse who cares enough to stay by my side through it all, especially the hard times. Life isn't always peachy, so I might not try as hard to butter things up or sugarcoat it. I'll remain loyal and choose to love her. All I ask is that she does the same. Opie, I am so sorry your girlfriend abandoned and cheated on you at a horrible time in your life. When you least needed and were least prepared to handle her betrayal, she did it. It's despicable of her to tell you that she'll be there only for you to hear that she slept over AP's house. As if that's not bad enough, she shows up and pretends everything is fine. That is a terrible, scary woman. She can't be trusted and she needs several come to Jesus meetings to get up to speed on what it means to be a man's woman. Men need support just as much as women do. When a man loses someone close to him, his woman should be the first one in line to support him. During this time, the best thing she could do is take on a selfless and giving attitude for as long as it takes to help get her man through this. When he feels hopeful because of her love, support, or nurturing, he'll be able to give her what she needs. Anyone who wants to be in a relationship should go in with understanding, patience, and a willingness to compromise. I wish you the best of luck in your recovery and thank you for being an excellent example for us to follow. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I started hanging out with each other as teenagers. We are the same age. At first, she was my best friend, but as we grew up, I started to believe she was my soulmate. Our hangouts became more like dates without the rest of our crew. After having intimate relations for the first time, we both wanted to get married. Each year of our marriage helped me to grow as a person. I was naturally shy and found it very hard to cope with change. For that reason, I didn't see myself ever traveling far from home for weeks at a time, but my wife added fearless adventure and hope into my life. We went to Hawaii, Canada, and Ireland. These were the top 3 places my wife wanted to see before she died, and we got to all of them before the age of 33. We used to go to clubs and stuff like that, but we started doing more athletic things to stay in shape. The thing we loved a lot and did the most frequently was mountain biking. My favorite part was getting home and sharing a shower and cup of tea together. We had several mutual friends we knew for years and friends from each of our jobs. We would have a mix of friends over once a week for games and drinks. One night, one man in particular was invited. I didn't know it at the time, but he was AP. We both knew him since we were 14. This was the first time I'd seen him in a while, and he was acting particularly interested in my wife. He wanted to know all about what she was up to and her accomplishments at work. He was impressed and staring at her. The others noticed, but continued chatting amongst themselves. I was glaring at him. He commended on what an amazing catch she was. I took ownership of her and told him I knew I was the luckiest man on earth. As he took a sip from his glass, he mumbled something that sounded like, "I must be too then." I asked what he said, but he played it off like it was nothing. While the men played Texas Hold'em, my wife and the women played dominoes in the living room. AP was extremely competitive with me. I felt like I either did something to tick him off, or he was jealous of me. He was furious when he lost, but my wife came in and patted his shoulder, assuring him there'd always be next time. He licked his lips and raised his eyebrows, like he wanted her next. I jumped up and asked what the heck that was. He just played dumb and swore that I must be a sore loser. I leaned over him, telling him that he was just ticked off that I had a woman he could only dream of. He jumped up, so we both started screaming in each other's face. Several of our friends, including my wife, separated and calmed us down. Outside, I was venting to my best friend about the things AP did and said, and how uneasy I felt around him. That's when I saw through the window. AP pulled my wife close to him, hip to hip, foreheads touching. She smiled before she pushed away playfully, only for him to follow her. She looked like she was being teased by someone she loved dearly. I was extremely disturbed. This moment haunted me for days. I tried to justify it any way I could, but it just didn't feel right. I laid awake one night at 3 a.m. until I decided to check her phone in the living room while she slept. I figured out her passcode and found my worst fears. All the evidence I needed was just waiting to be discovered on this little device she carried around 24/7. I never considered the possibility of her and AP having an affair, let alone one that was going on for 18 months. Her camera roll was filled with pictures of AP's junk, her in lingerie, parted lips, tongue sticking out, anything you can think of. Their messages spelled out everything, discussing their amazing sex, when they did it, how much they loved it, and how bad it would be if I found out. But that last part was just how my wife felt. AP wasn't worried at all. He was trying to convince her to tell me the truth so they could be together. He wanted her to live in his apartment, but she loved my house and pointed out the fact that AP made less money than me. I couldn't believe she thought about these things, but not about how I'd feel if I knew she was cheating on me. It was like that didn't matter, because she planned on keeping me in the dark for as long as possible. After I got copies of their whole conversation, at least 100 screenshots and 10 pictures, and put her phone back on the nightstand, I laid wide awake on the couch. It felt like I forgot who I was when I found out my wife was cheating. I felt like a little boy who wanted to go home, but home wasn't there anymore. It was the worst feeling I ever experienced. I had to keep going. When she woke up in the morning, she was worried and concerned about me sleeping on the couch. She asked me a whole bunch of questions like, was I mad at her? Did she do something wrong? What happened? She's sorry, and so on. I didn't feel like anything she said to me was worth answering. I wanted to accuse her of so much that anything I said wouldn't do my pain justice, so I gave her the silent treatment. I refused to answer anything she said, so she started to freak out and say she didn't deserve this and stuff like that. I left the house to file divorce papers and contact a lawyer. He advised me to wait until she got served. That way, she'd be less prepared to defend herself or make up lies about me. I was home with her, sitting on the couch with the television off when there was a knock at the door. She was served. She looked at me with huge, watering eyes, very confused. She begged me for answers now. She got on her knees in front of me and wanted to know why. I gave in to her dramatic performance and told her she was nothing to me anymore. That's why I was divorcing her. I showed her the screenshots on my phone, yelling that she was nothing but a lying, cheating, ugly actress that doesn't deserve a man's trust. I promised her I knew that for a fact because I was the man that trusted her, and all it got me was years of my life gone, like a prison sentence with a ghost. Everyone we knew throughout our lives and in town found out about her affair and immediately cut her off or treated her differently. Now she was just the one that cheated on her husband and lost everything. She lost the house. She lost her friends. She lost the great life we had together. Now she just trolls Facebook and Instagram, watching the people she used to know in person. She comments on anything I post, asking me questions all the time about anything. She's desperate for an answer, but I never respond. Opie, it's absolutely terrible that your wife cheated on you with a mutual friend that you both knew for years. It always hurts to hear stories like these because infidelity used to be much less common. A lot of women are being taught that it's okay to be selfish and demand what they deserve from their husband or man. Women should be taught that it isn't all about them. They aren't always right, and men are meant to be men. A woman's natural role in the relationship is to provide what her man needs so that he can function properly. By doing her part for him, he in turn does his part for her. There's give and take that needs to occur, but none of these healthy exchanges can happen if selfishness and unfair demands persist. Always treat your spouse as an equal. Consider their feelings and the trust they give you to be more important than your own selfish wants and desires. I think you handled this as sensibly as you could, and I respect you. I'm glad the divorce went in your favor and that you still don't tell your ex anything. She doesn't need to waste any more of your time. I wish you the best of luck in life and thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My girlfriend 23 and I 24 had been together for 3 years. We got along splendidly and our life was just fun. We were able to travel and do fun things because we worked and had money left over after bills. It probably helped that we got a discount on rent from my uncle, our landlord. For my girlfriend's 23rd birthday, I decided to take her to an artist's concert. For this story, I'm going to call him AP. She was always in love with AP from the first time she heard his music. She always struggled with self-confidence issues, but when she heard his songs, she opened up and became the super sexy woman I knew she was. I tried not to be jealous. I knew the chances of her getting together with him were slim to none, and she loved me. That still didn't change the fact that she wrote about him in her journal and would leave me in the midst of an argument to listen to him. I knew I was replaced by AP whenever she felt it was necessary, but I didn't think it was any different than how I found peace in the music I loved. On the way to the concert, my girlfriend would not contain herself. She was dressed super hot, and it seemed like her personal goal to grab AP's attention no matter what it took. She took selfies with me, but I could tell I was not important at this time. When he was introduced on stage, a tear came down her face. We were as close as anyone could get, right in front of the walkway, where he'd come out to sing and be close to his fans. When he saw my girlfriend, he couldn't stop looking. He was good at sharing his attention and staying focused, but as he sang, he kept looking back at her and touching her hand. She was in heaven. During one of the last songs, he held her hand again and must have given some kind of signal to someone that this was the girl he wanted. Not even 4 seconds later, he was singing somewhere else while she was given a backstage pass by security. Obviously, I could not believe this was not happening. I grabbed her hand and tried to leave, but she refused to come with me. She said this was the most exciting thing to ever happen to her, and she wasn't going to turn him down. My mouth was gaping. I asked her if she was leaving me for him because I knew if she was going back there alone, she was going to have sex with him. She said I didn't have to be like that, but I told her I wasn't playing games. If she slept with him, I wasn't going to forgive her as couples talk about. She easily picked him and turned back to watch the rest of the show. I stood there like a moron as people left for the parking lot. She was called back after a few minutes and didn't even turn to say goodbye. I then left the venue without her and made the 2-hour trip home. She called me 1 week later, sobbing. Out of curiosity, I listened to her story, but I told her we were done and there was no way she was getting a second chance from me. She said she was taken to AP's hotel room. They hung out for a long time, drank, and did drugs. Before they had sex, she was given a paper to sign that legally obligated her to never speak of this encounter with anyone, not even if there were undesirable consequences from this decision. Of course, he'd have to have some legal protection. If he was going to go around stealing people's significant others in a dream come true one-night stand. I basically laughed at my ex. I told her she made her choice. She cried harder and continued the story that she got to have a luxurious breakfast the next morning before AP's handlers returned her to her parents' house. She didn't want to tell them our house because she knew I was mad. Her parents quizzed her about what was going on and why she had locked herself in her old bedroom for a few days. She couldn't bring herself to tell them she cheated on me with a celebrity and was going to be alone now. Upon hearing that, I hung up on her and called her parents. I could hear her yelling in the background as I told them what happened. They kicked her out and called her several names. She was wailing as she packed her bags and complained about having nowhere to go. She was pretty much homeless now. They told her she should have thought about that before spreading her legs for someone who didn't care about her. It was a sweet piece of revenge for me to hear that. Then, things got even worse for her. She found out she was pregnant. As far as I know, she managed to find some sucker to live with and help raise the offspring, but the baby might have been put up for adoption. So that's how my ex-girlfriend completely screwed up her own life by having a one-night stand with someone she fantasized about. She never even wanted to have kids, but then because of her stupid self, she had a child by someone that she never saw again. Wow, Opie, you've been through quite the ordeal. There you were, being kind and sweet to your significant other by getting her concert tickets to her favorite artist, only for her to betray you and literally break up with you that very night. It doesn't matter who AP was, your girlfriend was definitely in the wrong. She was a naive woman who chose to give up everything for what she thought was her greatest fantasy. All it turned out to be was the start of her destruction and unstable life. I'm proud of you for sticking to your gut and refusing to stay with this woman. I know it must have been hard, and you probably considered just letting it go so you could continue on the expected path, but you did the right thing by refusing that. The only way to have a genuine relationship full of unconditional love is to commit yourself to only that person. Relationship issues aside, infidelity is not the answer. She needed to get her priorities straight and learn who she wanted to become. Thank you for sharing your story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife, 27, and I, 29, were living in a small apartment complex where 2 times a year a bug man would come spray the apartment. It only took a few seconds and then they were gone, but we were still anxious about it. We'd make sure the apartment was clean and one of the cats we owned was at her uncle's house. I don't like having people in my space, and my wife often said I had OCD. If things didn't go exactly according to plan, I would freak out. My wife was pretty understanding about that, at least, so she tried to stick to her word and give me a sense of stability while I did the same for her. On the morning the bug people were scheduled to come, I woke up in a panic at 5 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep knowing a stranger would be arriving at my house soon, and I had to let him in. My wife woke up at 7 and started our usual chores and breakfast. After I ate with her, I worked on the computer for a few hours, and it was already 12 p.m., past the bug man's arrival window. Thinking he wouldn't be there that day, I finally started to relax. I felt my eyelids droop, so I decided to lie down on the couch. I must have gone into a very deep sleep because I didn't wake up until 5 p.m. My wife told me the bug man had stopped by while I was sleeping. This made me feel odd. I asked her how long he took to do it and why she didn't wake me up. My wife looked happy but shy, like she didn't want to talk about this. She said he was only in for a few minutes. They didn't say much, and she didn't want to wake me up because I was sleeping so well. Knowing my wife, that response was vague. Usually, she was very specific and good with words. I just know if she didn't have anything to hide, she would have specified precisely how long he was in the house and what they said to each other, if anything. I didn't know what I could do besides believe her. I checked out our bedroom, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I realized at this point I was probably extra worried about this because my wife cheated on me in the past when we were dating. She says she thought we were on a break, but we weren't, really. I took out the trash and breathed in the fresh air for a minute to calm down when I saw a folded note beside our apartment door. It read, "To whoever is snoring on the couch in this apartment right now, I know my bug spraying coworker went into your apartment and spent hours with your wife. You'll have to get her to admit what she did with him. Signed, a concerned fellow." I could not believe it. I took the note to my wife in a daze. Without saying a word, I wanted her to tell me what it meant. She was really caught off guard. I think she was in happy la la land believing she got away with cheating on me again as I napped in her living room. I think she took pride in thinking she was so clever. When I showed her the note, it was like she was slapped across the face. She said she didn't think it was that long. I waited for her to say more, but nothing came. I asked her if she slept with the man, and she turned bright red. I started losing it, and she couldn't calm me down because she knew she was caught, and I wouldn't believe any lie. She was right. I told her to get out. I didn't even wait for her to pack. I just started shoveling things into the hallway of the complex. At least she knew it was safe from bugs. She started panicking for no reason other than her future was uncertain. She didn't care that she broke my heart. She just needed to figure out who she could sucker into giving her a new place to live. While she made her phone calls, I kept shoveling until I was sure the apartment didn't have anything that belonged to her. I pushed her out to stand in the hallway with her phone charger still swinging from her phone. I heard commotion when two of her relatives arrived. At first, I could tell they were mad at me, banging on the door, but since I wouldn't answer, they turned their attention to her, and she told them what happened. They said she was lucky they loved her, because what she just did was a terrible, terrible thing to do to someone. They made her wait for them to write me apology notes and slide money under the door, despite her objections, even though she should have been the one doing it. I don't know how long she stayed with them or where she ended up after this, but I know she had to face the reality that day she thought she was going to get away with cheating. After she left, I didn't want to rush into a new relationship, so I bought a puppy. He is my love and support until I try to tame a new woman. Opie, I am sorry your relationship with your wife continued after the first time she cheated on you. I know for a fact that she started to believe you were gullible and she could get away with it again. Please don't let this immature and irresponsible woman turn you away from dating completely. Take the time you need to heal and know for sure what you're looking for in your partner. Learn how you communicate with people and what your weaknesses are so you're better equipped to deal with an entirely different person. Stay grounded and reasonable to help your partner and yourself through obstacles or problems while avoiding any unnecessary drama or selfish arguments. I know you're going to make it through this. You made the hard choice to leave her, and it was the right thing to do. You can and will find a better spouse as long as you know who you are and what you want out of life. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate. A 24 male and my ex, 23 female, were together for about 2 years when she cheated on me. She was the epitome of a good Christian girl. She was in the church choir. She volunteered at the daycare of the church that ran for lower income members, and she was very devout in her religion. I wasn't raised around religion the way that she was. My parents would bring me to church on major holidays, and that was about it. Every now and then we would go on a Sunday, but it wasn't a priority for my family. I met my girlfriend at an Easter service. I thought she was cute, but I didn't feel like church was the right place to hit on someone. There was a picnic after the service, so I decided that I would strike up a conversation with her then. When I got to know her, I learned that her religion was very important to her. She was extremely devout and valued her relationship with God more than anything. Because I wasn't religious, I thought it would pose some problems in our relationship. However, it was easy for us to get through at first. When we weren't living together, everything was fine. We saw each other whenever we could, but she still prioritized her faith. I would like to point out that she was also abstinent and waiting until marriage. We did other stuff that I won't get into. I loved her and genuinely thought about getting married to her. Originally, she didn't even want to live with a man until she was married. I didn't want to propose to someone without living with them first. I figured it would serve as a nice trial before committing to someone forever. We had a long talk and we decided that we would rent an apartment together. There were a lot of boundaries in place, so she could keep her vow of abstinence. I never realized just how much time she spent at church until we were living together. As I mentioned, my family wasn't particularly religious, so I didn't join her most of the time. If anything, I considered myself agnostic and it wasn't something I was willing to budge on. We were living together. Our different religious outlooks became an issue. She was constantly trying to get me to go to services that she was attending. She was pressuring me to read through the Bible, and she was questioning why I felt the way that I did about religion. It started to seem like she wasn't okay with dating a non-religious person after all. I could see that our relationship was going downhill, and it was disheartening. I felt strongly about her, and I thought it was a shame that we weren't able to put those differences aside. However, I wanted to work on it because I did care about her. We ended up taking a short break. We weren't broken up, but we were separating to take some time for both of us and evaluate the relationship. I stayed in the apartment and she stayed with her parents again. We met up a couple of weeks later and decided we really cared about each other and we're going to give it a try. We changed a lot of behaviors that the other person wasn't thrilled about, and it seemed like things were going better. She stopped talking to me about a lot of the religious things that had been bothering me before. She joined a youth group that met on Thursday nights, so she would have some like-minded friends to talk to about her faith. I thought that was a great idea. She kept going and everything was repairing itself with our relationship. All the doubts that I had before were going away and I was seriously considering proposing. I went with her to church for an Easter service, as I had always done with my family before. While we were there, she introduced me to a lot of the church friends she had that I didn't know. She also introduced me to the youth pastor she spent a lot of time with in the youth group. Just to clarify, because I know when I say youth group, people are probably imagining teenagers and children. The youth group was for young adults, so it was mostly people in their early 20s. Right away, I noticed how friendly they were with each other. It rubbed me the wrong way. I noticed he didn't hug any other members, but he hugged my girlfriend. Something in her demeanor also shifted, and she kept looking over at him and blushing. I thought she must have had a little crush on him. He was a good-looking guy, but she was steadfast in her beliefs, so I didn't imagine they were doing anything. When we got home later that night, I teased her about it. She told me that I was silly for thinking she would have her eyes on any other man. At the time, I was confident in our relationship, so I believed her. Plus, he was a pastor at the church. I assumed he would have decent enough morals not to go after someone in a relationship. One day she told me that she was thinking about going on a mission trip with her youth group. They were flying out of the country to help rebuild houses in a low-income area that was badly affected by a tropical storm. She had been telling me about how much she wanted to go on a mission trip like that, and I was supportive of it. I told her that if it would make her feel good about something she was doing, she should go for it. She decided to go, and I said goodbye to her about a month later when she left. We made plans to talk every night and message each other regularly. Because she drove to the church, she left her car in the parking lot to drive it back when she returned. I figured it was safe, but I stopped by one day after work just to check on it myself. When I got there, I didn't see her car anywhere. Immediately, I assumed that it had either been towed or someone had stolen it when they saw it sitting there for a while. I went inside and looked for someone who might be able to help me figure out what happened. I actually found the pastor's wife, and I asked her if there were any surveillance cameras or anything in the parking lot to see what happened to her car. I explained that my girlfriend had left it in the lot when she left for the mission trip. The pastor's wife didn't know anything about a mission trip. She thought I was in the wrong church. I explained everything that my girlfriend told me, even naming the youth pastor that she was going with. The pastor and his wife both told me that they had no mission trip planned for that youth group. I knew then that my girlfriend had lied to me about the mission trip in general. If she wasn't on the trip, where was she? I had known her to be a nice, honest girl, and that wasn't adding up with the person that I knew. She wouldn't have lied about going on a trip like that. I was still talking to her and she was FaceTiming with me, so I knew she was okay. I just couldn't figure out why she lied. I did some digging online and I found some people who had gone through some similar things with their partners lying about trips. It all boiled down to cheating. My initial thought was that something was going on with the youth pastor. I didn't know where she was, but I needed some kind of confirmation about what she was doing. I was able to do this thing where I made a custom link for something I found online and shared it with her. When she clicked on the link, I could see exactly where she clicked on it from. I drove to the location and I saw her car sitting right in the driveway of a small house. There were a ton of crosses and flags with Bible verses on them in the yard, so I figured I was right to suspect the youth pastor of something. I didn't want to just knock on the door and see what was going on, so I stayed outside for a little while and kept an eye on it. Eventually, I saw both of them walking out of the house holding hands and getting into his car. I followed them to a restaurant outside of town where they clearly went on a date. They drove home not long after. I waited outside his house for a while contemplating what to do. I heard them laughing outside while I was there, so I got out of the car to walk around to the backyard. I was able to peek over a fence to see both of them inside of a hot tub. Both of them were completely naked and my girlfriend was straddling him. From the sounds of it, they were having sex. She hadn't even had sex with me and we'd been together for a couple of years at that point. I took a quick picture as proof so I could bring it up to her so she wouldn't try and lie about it. I went home and pretended like everything was normal until she got back. The following Sunday, when she was getting ready to go to church, I went with her. She was surprised, but it seemed to make her happy. If she knew the real reason I was going, she wouldn't have been. At the end of every church sermon, the pastor opened the floor for people to say something nice or read a Bible verse to the rest of the churchgoers. My girlfriend was surprised to see me get up and speak. I introduced myself to the church and I told them that I didn't know much about religion. I mentioned that my girlfriend was very devout and involved in the church. I even told them that I was considering marrying her. Everybody thought that was sweet and looked at my girlfriend with smiles. Then I brought up a passage from the Bible about adultery. I looked at my girlfriend at that moment and I saw her face go pale. I told them I was excited that my girlfriend was going on a mission trip, only to find out that the mission trip was a lie. Then I explained the entire story to them. Everybody in the room was murmuring to themselves, looking between my girlfriend and the youth pastor. The actual pastor walked me away from the microphone and out of the church. He told me that he understood I was upset, but that wasn't the place to have a conversation like that. I had done everything I needed to, so I didn't really care. I went home and my girlfriend arrived about a half hour later. She yelled and screamed at me for humiliating her in front of people. I told her that she was a liar and I had done so much to make sure she was comfortable and in the relationship, and she turned her back on me to sleep with another man. She told me that she was spiritually connected to him and their relationship differed from ours. I told her that wasn't an excuse. If she wanted to be with him, she should have just broken up with me. I would have understood if our religion and faith were a big issue in the relationship. I told her that she needed to get out of the apartment as soon as possible. She ended up moving out to go live with her parents. I got some calls from them about how angry they were that I aired her dirty laundry at church like that. Apparently everybody was making her feel very uncomfortable there, so she ended up leaving the church. The same thing happened to the youth pastor. A lot of the members frowned upon his actions and pulled their children out of his group. On top of that, a lot of the young adults that he worked with stopped visiting him. The church ended up looking for a new youth pastor to try and move away from the scandal all of that created. The fact that she lied about going on a mission trip just to be with him is crazy. That was a major lie. She pretended to be helping others when in reality, she was shacked up with the youth pastor at his house. It's a shame that she threw away what she had with you because of her desire to be with him. If the spiritual connection she had with him was so much stronger than what she had with you, she could have come to you and told you that. Breaking up is always the better option in a relationship. I'm glad that you were able to figure out what happened and get away from her before you proposed and dedicated your life to her. Now, let's move on to our next story. My wife and I had been together for about 3 years. We met at a movie theater where we both had matinee tickets to see a film. We were the only ones in the entire audience. Before it started, I saw her and thought she was cute. I moved over and sat down next to her, and we struck up a conversation before the movie started. When the film ended, I asked her to grab coffee with me so we could discuss the movie together. We exchanged numbers later that day, and we started dating. We both lived in the city in small studio apartments that we hated. We moved in together about 8 months into dating because we felt very strongly about each other. Plus, with our shared income, we could afford a one-bedroom apartment that was much bigger. We were able to buy furniture for the first time since living in the city and were very excited about that. Neither of us had the best jobs in the world. We loved each other, and we thought that was really what mattered. The little extra money that we had, we would use for experiences that we could do together, like concerts, movies, festivals, you name it. We didn't have a lot of money in savings at that point. A few months into living together, I said we should just get married. She went with it, and a few days later, we were signing papers to the courthouse. It didn't make much of a difference in our relationship, but just knowing we were married was nice. I got offered a job that paid a good deal more than what I was making in the city. We didn't want to move away because we loved the city life, but I couldn't turn down the job. One of the best things about the job was that I would work for 2 weeks straight, 10 hours a day, every day, then I would have 3 weeks off. It paid well, but it only paid once a month. We figured out a way for me to take this job and not have to leave the city. Essentially, I was booking a 2 week stay at a hotel and working, then coming back home for the 3 weeks that I was off. We knew that it was going to be a challenge for the first few months because of the extra money we'd be spending on hotels. We figured we could cut back on some things to make that work, then when we caught up and good money was coming in, we could start splurging again. My wife wasn't crazy about it. I wasn't giving her luxury bags or meals at 3-star restaurants, but we had the money to go out when we wanted to. During my first stint on the job, my wife kept complaining to me about how bored she was all the time and how she wished I hadn't taken the job. I was frustrated that she couldn't just suck it up for a few months while I did something that would change our lives with how much extra money we would have. About a week into my first work trip, I got a weird message from a friend. We were pretty close, but in recent months drifted away from each other. They messaged me and asked if anything had happened between my wife and me. I was confused and I told them that everything was fine. I was just away working on the new job. I asked about why they thought something was off, and they told me they were at a restaurant and positive they saw my wife with another man on a date. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told them that they must have been wrong, but they told me they took a picture just to be sure. They sent it to me, and it was my wife. I called my wife right away and asked her about it. She told me that it was a work meeting she was at and that I was overthinking it. I was suspicious, but she had never given me a reason to doubt her in the past, so I was more apt to take her word for it over the friend. I texted the friend and explained everything, then they apologized for overstepping their bounds. I returned home for my 3 week stay there, and everything seemed normal with my wife for the first week. During the other 2 weeks, I noticed that she was on her phone a lot more than usual. She was also taking a lot of selfies, which was strange for her. I was curious about who she was sending these pictures to if it wasn't me. I took a mental note of her Snapchat score one day, and I checked it about a week later, and it had increased by over 100. I kept an eye on it while I was away for my next 2 week stint at work, and it was steadily increasing more than it was when I checked it while I was home, and she wasn't sending me anything on Snapchat at all. I was in my head about why the score was changing so much, so I did a quick Google search to see if there were some obvious reasons. Almost everything I found confirmed that she was sending and receiving messages. From everything I gathered with other people asking these questions, they were concerned that their partners were cheating. When I got home after work, I kept that thought in the back of my head, but I didn't say anything. I didn't have any proof, and telling her that I noticed her Snapchat score increasing was going to make me look crazy and jealous. The first opportunity one had to take a look at her phone, I jumped at it. She was in the shower, and she left it sitting on the bed. When I looked through it, I found three major things. The first was that she had an app downloaded to help sugar daddies find people to date. Her profile showed her in skimpy dresses and lingerie showing off her body. Dozens of men were messaging her. Some even sent her money on Venmo to prove they were the real deal. The second thing I noticed was dozens of Snapchat messages from men with nicknames like Ben Defense Attorney Tesla and others like that. She was exchanging nudes with the men on Snapchat. The third thing was her text message exchanges with some of the men. She had clearly met up with at least three of them. They had taken her to fancy restaurants and bought her new clothes and things for the house. I hadn't noticed the things before, but when I looked around, I saw them. Through the messages, I figured out she brought one guy back to our apartment and had sex with him in our bed. I was furious with what I saw. It was obvious it was some kind of retaliation against the spending cuts we were doing while my job was new. She wanted fancy dinners and expensive wines, so she lied and stabbed me in the back. I sent myself a bunch of screenshots and videos of the things that I'd seen so I could have them for our impending divorce. There was no way I was going to be staying with her and sending all of the money that I was earning at my new job to her when she was doing that. I spent the rest of my time at home secretly looking for another apartment closer to my job. I didn't want anything to do with her, and I didn't even want to be in the city because it reminded me of her so much. When the time came for me to go back to work, my wife really had no idea I was leaving for good. I took a lot of things out while she was at work, so she wouldn't notice me taking everything out of the apartment. When I got there, I moved into a new apartment and took my wife's name off of my bank account. I had been looking for a divorce attorney while I was still in the city. I had papers and I was sending them to her in the mail. I got off work one night and looked at my phone to see I had dozens of missed calls and text messages from her. She had received the petition for divorce in the mail, and that explained everything about why I wanted a divorce. She didn't know why I was accusing her of cheating. I sent her a text message telling her everything I knew and a couple of screenshots I had taken. Apparently, she was going to sue me for going through her private property. I didn't know how well that would hold up in court. We ended up going through with the divorce, and I was able to get my name off of the lease in the city, so she was solely responsible for it. I posted about the divorce on social media before she commented on anything so I could have the narrative in my own hands. I had a gut feeling she was going to try and blame the separation on me, so I wanted to get ahead of it. We were divorced, and I didn't know her anything in spousal support, but I figured she was still getting a lot of her money from the men she was seeing. I had a few of their phone numbers from the screenshots that I had gathered. I threw all of them into a group chat, and I sent a message telling them that my ex-wife was married to me when she was with them and that she was talking to countless men and taking their money. Some of them didn't care about it. They probably assumed that was what was happening anyway, but it seemed like a couple of them thought that they were in something serious with her. I hoped they would cut things off with her. That would be ideal, so she would not have any of these men paying for her things anymore. She called me a few days after that and cursed me out over the phone for ruining her relationships. She probably lost out on a nice sum of money from the men she was stringing along. I felt bad for them in some ways, but at the same time they were on a sugar daddy dating website, so they had to know what they were getting into. Now I live closer to my job, so I'm not having to commute back and forth, which is great. I have a nice apartment, and I'm making a decent living. It's been about a year since all this happened, so I'm getting back out into dating and hoping for the best. Not a lot of people would do that, and that seems to be a catalyst for you discovering this whole other life she was living while you were away. It's honestly disgusting that she would bring them back to your own apartment and sleep with them there. I understand it's probably safer for her to do it there rather than going to a virtual stranger's house, but it's very disrespectful. I'm glad that you messaged the men that she was talking to. I would bet that many of them thought they were the only ones she was talking to. It seems like she was lying and misleading quite a few of them. I would assume that none of them knew she was married. Hopefully that did affect the income she was making from all of that, and she will look back and regret what she did. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My girlfriend, 36, admittedly had a thing for older men. I, 49, was surprised she came onto me at a bar one night after I'd worked all day at my construction job. We started talking, and I couldn't help but see the good in her that she wanted me to see. She had a son who was 16 at the time. His father left them suddenly when he was just 9 years old, so he had very little faith in any man to become his father figure. I fell for this boy because I, too, grew up without my father. I wanted to be there for him, even before I met him. My girlfriend and I started dating, so shortly after that, I met her son, Chris. He was definitely resistant to getting to know me, but wouldn't tell me why right away. After 1 year of failed attempts at bonding, he finally told me I wasn't going to be around long enough for him to trust me. I told him I didn't intend on leaving and wanted to be someone he could look up to. I didn't tell him, but I really loved his mom already. Then he told me it wouldn't be my fault when our relationship ended. I was confused. I asked him what he meant, and he said his mom had 5 boyfriends since his dad left. I was surprised, but still not completely deterred. Maybe those men weren't suitable to be a father example. Now I realize I was just defending the woman I fell for, without knowing her all too well. I decided to talk with my girlfriend about it. She came off as defensive, reminding me that she said her son didn't trust any man. When I told her he said it wouldn't be my fault, she didn't have a response for that. A part of me could tell she was plain dumb and just blaming her ex for her son's fears, even though that might not be why. I decided to stick around, believing I could prove this negative premonition wrong. Honestly, I cared for her and her boy so much. Sometimes I wonder if my heart is too big. Chris and I did manage to have several deep talks and bond with each other. I took him wherever he wanted to go and gave him honest answers I would have craved as a teenager without my father. Then, one day, everything came to a screeching halt. Chris barged into the house crying and yelling for me, followed by his confused mother. He quickly told me that what he warned me about had happened. Before his mother could interrupt or have any idea what he was going to say, he said he saw his mother having sex with his teacher. Then he added, "This is what he warned me about 2.5 years ago." His mother, and I gasped. He continued by saying she thought he was going to his friend's house after the parent-teacher conference, but he felt like he needed to stay for some reason. He waited in the car for her to come out. When she didn't come out of the school, he went back in and peeked through the skinny window in the door of his classroom. Even though they turned off the lights to make it dark, he saw them in the corner of the room. My would-be stepson then said, now that I knew the truth, I could kick them out. He was used to it and said he didn't need me or her. He went upstairs to pack, and his mom stepped in to quietly tell me he didn't see what he thought he saw. Her face was red, and she just looked desperate for me to believe her lies. She started crying, and I didn't say anything and just stared at her. She told me again that it wasn't true, but her son heard her and asked if she was calling him a liar. She screamed that this was adult business, and it was none of his concern. He screamed that it was his concern because she was taking away any chance he had to find a father or a home. I said her son is telling me he saw something that would make him have to leave me and his home. I'm likely to believe him over her. Her son then said I should trust him because he would never want to marry a woman like his mother. She screamed when she heard him say that. She was just beside herself, collapsed onto the floor. I told her she needed to get out of my house, and we were done. I wished her luck finding another place to live. I went upstairs and told Chris that if he ever needed to come to my house, my door would be open. He also had my phone number. He was about to be 18, so if he sought my company, his mother wouldn't be able to do anything about it. They left in a packed car, and she found them a new place to stay, but it was with a creepy stranger. When Chris turned 18, he moved in with me. It was an incredibly happy day for us, but not so much my ex. She hated it. She tried to say it couldn't happen, but it most definitely could and did. I acted as his father and continue to while he lives on campus. It's a relief that neither of us depend on his mother. He still keeps in touch with her, but he's learned to keep his distance emotionally after all the instability she put him through. I guess karma hits hard though. After Chris moved in with me, she was diagnosed with an STD that is hard to ignore or manage. She also had another baby at the age of 41. I'm pretty sure she doesn't know who the father is. Speaking of that, per Christopher's request, we submitted a complaint to the school board about the teacher that slept with his mom. Our letter was taken very seriously by them, so the teacher was fired immediately. They asked Chris if there was anything else they could do, but he was happy with that. I didn't care what his mom was up to anymore, because she wasn't much of a loss. I was glad I got to keep Chris in my life, though, so maybe everything happens for a reason. Oh, B, you might have a point there. Everything could happen for a reason. Maybe our only obligation in life is to take what we can learn from experiences. Life is a balance of caring for ourselves and others. Some people honestly don't deserve our love because by trying to love them, we would only be sacrificing ourselves. Never allow something or someone to stay in your life if it's discouraging you. Communication allows for relationships to prosper, but if a person lies and cheats without regard to their spouse, they are communicating that they don't value them. Find someone else and never look back. This woman's actions, especially as a mother, were despicable. I am so glad you and Chris worked together to free yourselves from her. She'll never be able to maintain healthy relationships if she doesn't change. I wish you and Chris the best of luck in life. Thank you for sharing this story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. At the time of this story, I was a private investigator for 20 years. I'd been divorced once and really just wanted to meet someone to love and retire with. When I met my girlfriend one random night at a bar after work, I thought I started falling for her too fast. I kept reminding myself to take it slow and made sure this is the woman I want to be with, because if heartbreak can be avoided, it should be. The problem was she was also moving too fast. She said she lived with her parents and they had a good relationship, which made me wonder why she wanted to start sleeping over for several nights in a row. She said it was because she was head over heels for me and I felt the same about her, so it was hard to argue. While she slept over one night, she asked me if the security cameras in my home recorded all the time. I laughed and told her they haven't worked since day one. I just went to all that trouble to get them up there, that I never felt like taking them down. This was actually a lie. The cameras did work and recorded all the time, but her question made me nervous. After all, I was a private investigator, and if there was anything she tried to get past me, I was going to find out. It was probably just a month after that I gave her a key to my apartment. I told her I didn't want her there unless I was there, after work or on days off. She agreed right away and was really happy I trusted her with my key. The next day, I was at work and the cameras caught her in my home. She looked around sheepishly, but eventually started getting food out of the fridge and watching television. She looked so happy and cute, even though I was kind of upset that she completely disregarded what I said. I decided to watch her for a while longer without telling her I could see what she was doing. Before I knew it, we'd been together for 2 years. During that time, I'd watch her at the apartment without her knowing. She was adorable, but she did start acting funny. By now, she had moved in. After being together for just a short time on the grand scale of things, she started to get short with me. I did my best to stay on good terms, but it was becoming difficult. It was while I was having doubts that her sister randomly called me on Facebook. She was known for starting drama, so I was hesitant to answer, but I'm glad I did. She warned me that her sister might take advantage of me. I asked why, and she said it's because she can change her mind suddenly. She added that my girlfriend never lived at their parents' house as an adult, and they didn't have a good relationship. When she met me, my girlfriend was sleeping wherever she could, mostly her car or a friend's house. This was a little unsettling, but even with her acting funny, I reminded myself that her sister could just be starting drama, so I did not need to break up with my girlfriend. I thought we could work through this, or whatever happened in her past. I knew she didn't want to break up, because otherwise she would have just left me, right? Wrong. Instead of breaking up and losing her place to live, she found it easier to go behind my back. At work, I got a notification for the camera. I actually didn't mean to click on the notification, but my giant thumb did. The app opened as I tried to close it, but then I saw my girlfriend bringing another man into the apartment. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I still left for home right away. I walked in on them trying to hide. I pulled a pee out of the closet I saw him go in, while she put on her panties. He ran for it and apologized to me. My girlfriend was just sobbing and said that he was just supposed to give her a nude massage, but nothing else. I told her to quit it. I knew she didn't think she'd be caught, but the cameras worked the entire time she lived here. Her jaw dropped, and she actually tried to blame me for lying to her. I told her she was stupid and cruel for doing this, and I wanted her out of my house. She begged me for another chance, and admitted she was wrong for blaming me at all. I told her I still didn't believe she knew how serious this was. I would never be able to trust her again, and I should listen to her sister's advice right away. My girlfriend assumed I would never find out about this. It's thanks to my cleverness and a little bit of luck that I did. I told her again to get out, and she did, because she ruined it. I wanted to share this story for other men, or anyone going through this betrayal. It's exhausting, but it's not impossible to get through this. Just stay persistent, and remember what you need to do for yourself. Since all of this happened, I have married a different woman, and we've been together for 13 years. Turns out there was a reason I didn't ever feel ready to propose to my ex-girlfriend. I was meant to find the next woman. Opie, I am so sorry your girlfriend tricked you into wasting time with her. I am so glad you accidentally opened the app and saw what she was doing. As an investigator, you must have luck on your side. Your girlfriend was unfathomably stupid for bringing a man to your home after you supported and loved her. I have little faith in her ability to compromise or communicate in a relationship between two mature people. I am so relieved you got out of this and found the opportunity to meet your wife. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.